A quick word about Kashmir. It's a country I know. Well, Kashmir is, as you know, half occupied by India, half occupied by Pakistan. And it's one of the countries where the Research and Analysis Wing, RAW, and the ISI, what does ISI stand for? Anyway, that's RAW is India's secret service. ISI is Pakistan's secret service. The two of them fight proxy wars in Kashmir and Afghanistan. So you have Indian-occupied Kashmir, where the Pakistan government sends down terrorists to go and blow up everything and shoot everybody dead that they can, and you have Afghanistan where India and Pakistan do much the same sort of thing. Anyway, the Indian Armed Forces, it's the most militarized place on earth. The Special Powers Act of 1990 granted immunity to Indian soldiers who took action in Kashmir. And similarly, the Public Safety Act allowed for the imprisonment of people for 2 years without trial. Narendra Modi, India's Prime Minister, has now withdrawn Article 370 of the Indian Constitution, which gave Kashmir special status, which is technically illegal, but who cares? I mean, look, we don't care about the law in Britain. We'll do anything to subvert the wishes and rights of people. So it's the same in India. And I've visited Indian-occupied Kashmir, and in my 20 years ago, admittedly, but nonetheless, way back then there had been about 6,000 rapes over the years of Kashmiri women walking in the countryside. You can't walk a lady cannot walk in the countryside. 21,000 way back then. 21,000 homes had been burnt to the ground of people who were perceived as in any way sympathetic with the insurgency or those that were rising up against the Indian government for independence for Kashmir. You couldn't find a young man, even a boy serving you in a hotel. You couldn't find one that hadn't been at some stage hauled in, tortured perhaps. People in Kashmir wanted family unification. They wanted independence. They wanted an end to the bombings from Pakistan with terrorist bombings. They wanted that ended because they wanted the tourism back. It's a terrible situation in Kashmir, made worse by the big actors in the area, India and Pakistan. In Pakistan, the journalists can't operate; they're persecuted. Certainly in what they call Azad Kashmir, free Kashmir, is not very free. But in one sense, it's better than Indian Kashmir because you haven't got the thousands upon thousands of troops. The most militarized place on the planet. And there's an international failure to deal with this thing. There was an ambassador to India, U.S. ambassador called Frank Wisner, who was ambassador between 94 and 97, who did a lot of good work on the Kashmir issue. But the Muslims, and it's largely a Muslim population in the valley, are really ruthlessly hurt. This is a sectarian fight. Sectarianism. I call it sectarianism. Religious hatred, then. Religious hatred is worse than racism, isn't it? No, I suppose it isn't. They're both evil, aspects of evils, two sides of the same coin. Religious hatred, the kind of we are better than you hatred that Daesh postulated. The BJP in India, is there much difference between them and Daesh if they preach religious hatred, if they say, we are better than you, the cruelest thing one man can say to another in terms of religion or in any which way? It's awful. And and yes, the largest Kashmir's largest expatriate community are Britons of Pakistani origin. 70% of Britons of Pakistan origin are from Kashmir. They're good at grumbling, but they're not much good at doing much else but grumbling. They haven't got any real united action. There's no real, they're great at grumbling. They might do protest marches in Birmingham. They can't attend a public meeting in Birmingham and actually discuss the situation and discuss ways forward. Because they're not good at much else than grumbling. So there's been little international action. There's little coherent support from the international Kashmiri population. Muslim India, of course, has got its own problems. There has been support, I suppose, for a three-way referendum, but from some in Kashmir who would like to see a referendum on whether they go with India or go with Pakistan or are independent. But of course, India and Pakistan do not support that. Pakistan is bitterly opposed to any referendum on the status of the future of Kashmir, as is the state of India. So there seems to be no end to cross-border terrorism, which is what everybody wants. The best solution, of course, in my view, is to make the line of control the international boundary and forget it. Forget Kashmiri independence. It's a joke, isn't it? It's not going to happen. But the Kashmiri diaspora and the Kashmiri people do not want that. Well, come on then. And they say the onus is on the Indian government to be peaceful. Well, how are they going to be peaceful as long as there's terrorism in Kashmir? And the Kashmiris at local level won't participate in local elections. Most of the seats are not even contested. Oh, come on. So they have a chance to make a voice heard, and they just turn away. Well, it's peer pressure. It's pressure from, they're frightened to stand because they're such brutal and ruthless groups, these terrorist groups from Pakistan. They're frightened of being killed and their families killed if they stand in these elections. The best to keep your head down. So Kashmiris are being, and these terrorists are Kashmiris. They're young boys that go north, get trained and exploited by Pakistan, by Lakshya Taiba, or whatever these groups are, and sent south again to kill. The people in Kashmir were quite like the Good Friday Agreement. The kind of thing we had in Britain, of course, falling apart now with Brexit, but nonetheless it's an interesting model. There are parallels, but it's not the answer for Kashmir. But we need to think about outside of the box about a way forward for Kashmir and think of an acceptable and viable solution other than independence, other than a bloody struggle. We need a different way because the present approach has failed, and the government of Pakistan has failed, and the government of India has failed, and the people of Kashmir have failed themselves. Easy for me to say, isn't it? As an outsider. But we do need to think. It's gone on for 50 years. We're talking since 1948. You could argue since before that, but anyway, since 1948, since Britain created the mess in the first place, because of course we were the colonial power. Blame Britain. It's Britain's fault, this mess. And 1 million died at the time of independence in India. 1 million died in sectarian bloodshed. And Kashmir goes on to this day. People can't get in touch with their families because the country has been isolated. So cruel, so unfair. Cruel, cruel, cruel. Cruel India. Well, Muslim populations are persecuted in many places on earth, aren't they? China has a hand in Kashmir, occupies 20% of the 20% of the state. Yes, yes. It's not very good with its Muslims either. Well, that's a whole nother story. Oh dear. But anyway, let's hope for a better future. I mean, we could. The expatriate community here in Britain could do something to help the Muslim community in Kashmir by actually thinking of strategies that would enable people to stand in local elections. A small step, but one step amongst many that would make for a better future for Kashmir.